Again, it's a totally unique sort of legal action in theory, which was done because Trump was apparently desperate to lash out against these parties and couldn't do so through the normal legal channels.
Welcome to Cornhole Champions, a weekly podcast powered by Iowa Starting Line, where we throw backs at the state's biggest stories. I'm Zachary Oren Smith. It's Wednesday, and I'm joined today by Iowa Starting Line's community editor, Amie Rivers. Billionaire Elon Musk has been stoking fires about government waste and fraud. Like the Eye of Sauron, he focused his attention on Lutheran Services of Iowa, questioning the credibility of this long-running program with a sterling reputation. And when given the chance to defend them in front of Congress, Governor Kim Reynolds gave the W to the billionaire. Well, she's walking it back now. Meanwhile, they're dealing with a bruised reputation and a new space in the universe of government conspiracy. That's coming up on Cornhole Champions. So, Amie, how are you planning for the blizzard?
Oh my God, don't say that. We're not really getting a blizzard, are we?
I was seeing on the Register reporting about a bunch of snow falling, something as much as 8 inches in certain areas in the state. How do you prepare for like big snow weather?
Definitely go grocery shopping.
What do you shop for? What do you get?
The typical blizzard staples, I think,
For example,
bread, milk, hot chocolate, re-up the DoorDash funds, make the delivery people bring me food the American way.
This is good.
Because I want to be safe in a blizzard, but F the people making pennies on the dollar delivering our food and groceries.
Because I want to be cozy. Make the DoorDash man get it, because I want to be cozy.
What kind of economy?
First story. Governor Kim Reynolds got herself into a little trouble last week. She was testifying before a U.S. House committee when this interaction went down.
Ma'am, I want to bring your attention to something very disturbing that Musk just recently tweeted out. As we see at this visual, he said, the Doge team is rapidly shutting down illegal payments to Lutheran Family Services. Musk retweeted a post from Michael Flynn likening Lutheran Family Services to, quote, a money laundering operation. Governor, you don't believe that the Lutheran Church or Lutheran Family Services is a money laundering operation, correct?
Look, I can tell you that in Iowa, the taxpayers of Iowa hold me personally responsible and accountable for state government, just as they hold President Trump accountable
the Lutheran
for his
Church is not a money laundering operation, right?
And the election that
Ma'am,
we just
Des Moines, Iowa is the home to the largest Lutheran congregation in the United States.
Iowans overwhelmingly.
Is the Lutheran Church a money laundering operation?
Listen.
Of course not.
First of all, every program should be looked at, that's what we're trying to do.
Okay,
you have
the
to
Lutheran
look.
Family
I looked
Church
at
has
800.
some connection to money laundering. Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm not saying that, but I said every.
Yes or no question. Is it a money laundering operation?
I can't speak to that.
You can't speak to that. Oh my God.
In her Monday press conference, Reynolds emphasized that she understood the work that Lutheran Services of Iowa does to provide mental health resources, foster care, support, and that old school Christian work of putting food in the mouths of hungry children. And she was made to say this out loud.
I absolutely do not think that Lutheran Services is a money laundering organization.
I know.
How far the religious right has fallen. Wow. They really had to mobilize to get her to say that because this coalition of billionaire freaks is taking over.
There's like part of this press conference where I'm actually on the governor's side. I find it really annoying during these committee meetings when they give testifiers like a kind of a binary yes or no and they
right.
Like with the ideas they're cornering them to like say something stupid. It's a great way to get like a fun clip. Hey, Republicans and Democrats do this, and this definitely did occur during the committee testimony. And I find the whole like reclaim my time bit, the like kind of like the huffy like I reclaim my time. I find that annoying as hell. I'm actually when Reynolds said that during the press conference, I was like, I relate to that. I hear that. But then she had the gall to say that she was taken out of context, that she wasn't given adequate time to explain kind of like what it is she meant during this thing. You just listeners just heard the full unedited kind of answer where she refuses to say that Lutheran Services of Iowa is a money laundering scheme, which is super interesting because, like, you heard, she talks quite a bit in that clip, but never once does she say, no, I don't think they're laundering money, right? There's no evidence out here for me to believe that that these folks are, this religion that I think Reynolds is a part of, I think she is a Lutheran, that this service of this religion is a money laundering scheme. Actually, like, if there's an easy yes or no question, I think that might be one of them. I don't think you need any more context. I don't think that there's any context that would have made that answer any less insane.
She said look it instead of no, which tells you, and they weren't even cornering her, right? Like, I understand that a lot of these hearings are like political posturing and whatever. And if you're going up against, the other party, of course you're going to be really sensitive to that. But Reynolds was honestly defending Elon here. She wasn't defending herself. And in doing that, you are throwing Lutheran Services under the bus. So, like, even to come back and be like, I do think they do good work is a much smaller platform. I mean, even look at how far those clips have gone across the ecosystem. This speech is not going to go that far. So I think, like, people are going to remember that when given the opportunity, she definitely was like, yeah, Elon, instead of, yeah, the organizations that are serving and supporting Iowans.
When given the opportunity to not get cornered into implying that Lutheran Services is a money laundering scheme, like, yeah, I didn't know that this was, I didn't realize this was getting cornered. Here we are learning about just kind of the stakes here.
Well, and despite this statement, right, she goes yesterday and does her own executive order to start her own Doge, right? So she is starting what she said she was going to start, the Iowa Department of Government Efficiency, which presumably is going to be a carbon copy of everything that they're doing at the federal government. So that has to give you pause if you're Lutheran Services. Like, that has to give you pause if you're any government agency, honestly. But the fact that she's willing to just sort of throw them under the bus means she could throw anybody under the bus at this point.
Yeah, I mean, let me be clear. I think government efficiency is a good thing, right? I think it's awesome for our government to constantly be considering the extent to which taxpayer funds are being used in vetted ways, right? That we're cutting down on ways that we're looking for the best way to provide services to Iowans, right? And, it's so great that the governor's interested in that. It's interesting that it's happening now when, just 2 years ago, they passed a bill to take away this kind of power from the state auditor, right?
That part.
To take away the ability for a elected official, right? Someone who is elected on a statewide basis,
Right.
To be able to do this kind of government efficiency work. So I don't know, like,
Also,
again, we love efficient.
The biggest unvetted program right now is school vouchers.
$1 billion in 4 years, right? And yet, while they claim that there's a ton of oversight of this program, like, you be the judge.
By whom?
Right? Sorry?
By whom?
By whom will they be? Exactly. By whom will they be evaluated?
Yep.
Right. It certainly will not be. I don't anticipate this Doge program taking too close of a look at our private schools.
Oh no, it'll be absolutely political. Prove us wrong, Reynolds.
Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. I would love to see. I would love to see that report.
Doge is immediately going to go after the auditor, just the last remaining Democrat. Let's look at the auditor's office first, and maybe only.
Why do we need a state auditor? Have
Why?
you thought about that? Let's just cut the office. Really, it's when why not just have the governor checking her own checking her own math, right? Why not just have the governor? Why audit anything? Really,
Why
audit's just a waste of time. You're just giving money to CPAs. We hate CPA on this podcast. We hate CPAs.
We hate numbers.
Get out of here, CPAs. Enough of that. Second story. The Register published a glowing profile of Iowa House Speaker Pat Grassley. In it, Grassley plays the oh shucks farmer who just happened to end up with the gavel, leading the first Republican supermajority since the 1970s. U.S. Senator Chuck Grassley isn't mentioned until the very end when the Register explores the grandson's chances of running to replace his granddad. While it keeps returning to Governor Kim Reynolds' voucher purity test for House Republicans, it lays House Republicans' unity at the feet of Grassley's willingness to hear people out, not the governor primarying their fellow members. Amie, did you read through this profile, right?
Oh, yes. Yes, I did. Yes.
I was amazed by it because like it kind of gave this like kind of kumbaya vision of kind of how House Republicans are functioning currently.
Yeah, Stephen Gruber Miller specifically asked about challenges, and Pat Grassley was like, "Oh, I don't know if we've had any." And then he was like, "Well, I guess school vouchers." Oh, you mean when your own governor primaried your own representatives?
Start at the beginning, Amie. You were at Iowa starting line for this, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So when school vouchers started coming up, a lot of rural legislators, including Republicans, were like, no, this is a bad idea. We don't have any private schools here. This would decimate our rural schools. And basically, their concerns went unheard. I mean, they didn't go unheard, right? They couldn't pass that legislation. And Reynolds was like, time to go, get in line or get out, basically. Primaried a bunch of them, and a bunch of them left. There are still some that won't vote for school voucher legislation, but they're in such a minority that they don't matter because Republicans do have supermajority. So it is really interesting, like, that he would suggest that, like, oh yeah, the caucus sometimes doesn't get along. Literally, the governor has made it so that your caucus will fall in line.
As I understand, four Republicans who didn't support the governor's voucher bill in the first year were primaried and they had their seats taken by their primary challenger the following year. The governor didn't like the outcome she got when they in that first year when people opposed her private school voucher program, and she said, all right, well, we're going to learn from this and we're going to remember this, and come the next year they were able to pass it, no problem.
She knows what she has. I mean, she knows that people like their schools, but she also knows that people will vote R in these super rural districts regardless. So
right.
If you're a low information voter and all you know that there's an R and a D on the ballot and you don't know anything about if somebody took somebody else's spot because of school vouchers, you'll just vote R. Reynolds knows that this dynamic exists, and that's why it's been working so far.
And it's not as if unity isn't the word that I would use for the current coalition, right? I think there's been a lot of chatter around the Capitol about, given the House is larger than ever Republican majority, right, that people are feeling a little more willing to step outside of the kind of firm lines in the sand that leadership draws for them, right? The reality is they just don't actually need that many of their votes, so right. The need to like kind of lay down the law is just not what it used to be. You can see it over in Iowa Senate District 35. This is the district that Democrat Mike Zimmer won. And nationally, this story has been going everywhere, right? You've had national spotlight on Democrat is able to flip a Trump plus 24, 21 district.
Yep.
When I think maybe a more important piece of this narrative came out in a letter from the Jacob Hall, the guy that writes the Iowa Standard, kind of a right wing blog here in Iowa. He wrote about this. He wrote about the kind of lack of support that the Republican in that race, Katie Whittington, got during this race. Iowa Starting Line, our publication, wrote about this kind of MAGA meetup party that was going to be held. To include everyone's favorite former Iowa representative, former U.S. Congressman Steve King, the white supremacist. He was gonna appear. And party leadership shut that down. You'll notice that they pulled that advertisement from Kate Whittington's social media. There was a lot in that letter from the Iowa Standard guy writing about the kind of issue, right, of finding party support for candidates for what he would consider like truly conservative candidates, truly like kind of right-wing MAGA candidates. Well, they're able to hold kind of a fusionist union between kind of your more like business-minded Republicans and the righter side of that coalition. I mean, there are real fault lines that are forming. I was listening to Steve Bannon, an interview of Steve Bannon the other day, our favorite Rasputin of the MAGA universe, talking about exactly this, right? That like right now we're in power and there's a lot of fault lines among Republicans, among conservatives about kind of what the direction of a Trump-centered party ought to be, right? And yeah, so the notion, right, that the House Republicans are this like monolithically united group of folks. It just doesn't hold out in the details.
It's super true. I mean, in a two-party system, you're always going to have a lot of different coalitions that have to come together in order to stay in power. And when you get like majorities like that, and we've seen this in Iowa too. We were just talking about this. The coalitions start to fracture because they can. Because it's not as necessary. And I think that if that fracture becomes wider, though, it really becomes necessary to sort of pull it together. The interesting part that you were mentioning about the Zimmer case, yeah, that makes me sort of take it back about the fact that Reynolds knows that that'll always work to primary. Maybe it doesn't work in this environment now. Maybe Zimmer was an outlier, or maybe Zimmer was a harbinger of things to come.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that one. I tend to think that was a one-off, but I'm never happy about anything.
When is the next? Because we've got another one coming up. Because
that's
of that.
Right. We've got a down in House District 100. There's a coming special election. You can read about that at iowastartingline.com. That'll be happening in the month of March.
So that might be an interesting one. If that also goes Dem, does that tell you something?
I mean, maybe, but you keep in mind that the one that just happened included Clinton, the city of Clinton, Iowa, right, which old Democratic stronghold, right? There was some Rita Hart, the chairman of the Democrats, is based out of Clinton, Iowa, right? So like, there's there were just some atmospherics that help out. That was also like a Trump 21 plus 21 district. This would be a Trump 27 district, right? It's much higher, right? So. The organizers who plan to knock doors for that race this year, they don't seem to be as enthusiastic about their chances this time around. But
are Republicans actually putting resources into this one?
I mean, I don't think they want to be embarrassed, but I haven't really talked to anyone organizing campaigns over there. I'll be interested if anybody is organizing a campaign down there for Republicans. I mean, hit me up. You can find me at Zach@iowastartingline.com. I'd be interested to hear any perspectives on or off the record. One more thing I wanted to touch on this is, again, just kind of speaking more towards like this kind of like fractured GOP. Currently, the Iowa Senate Republicans and Iowa governor are simpatico on a 2% increase in what's called state supplemental aid. This is kind of a really important metric. It's the percentage that the legislature sets for increasing, basically for increasing the amount of funding for public schools. It gets plugged into a larger formula that kind of spits out kind of how much the state is going to fund schools based on the pupils that attend it. Well, last week, speakers of the House, Pat Grassley, said that actually instead of the 2%, we're proposing a 2.25% percentage point increase. In addition to kind of these increases that these kind of this menu, what do you call it, a menu of increases that range from transportation costs to per pupil equity, right? Just a bunch of different, kind of a grab bag of ideas that he said came directly from superintendents. Keep in mind when the Republican or Democratic caucuses are figuring out kind of what their stances are, those meetings happen behind closed doors, right? If you want to talk about the kind of smoke-filled room, right? This is these plans get drafted. People like Pat Grassley try to sell their caucus on ideas like this 2.25% increase during these caucus meetings, which can last like for minutes and they can last for an hour. It just kind of depends on how much business there is to discuss. This would have been kind of one of these pieces to come out of that. And that the House Republicans would kind of be, go in a different direction than the governor, than their colleagues in the Senate. kind of tells you maybe that there's that some of their membership are feeling some of the pressure, maybe some of these rural districts that we've been talking about that are worried about missing out on some education dollars. These are the conversations that are occurring in those rooms.
Voters still care about their rural schools. I mean, regardless of who's in office, and they're going to want to push for that. Like, maybe if they've decided, like, okay, sure, school vouchers for people who need it, but still fund the schools, maybe they are feeling that pressure. And I wanted to point out, I just looked this up, the inflation rate for 2024 was 2.9. So at this point, you're still not giving them, you're actually giving them less money based on inflation. So, I mean, we're still underfunding our schools.
That's a great point. I mean, like, the reality is that while Republicans like to make a big to-do about how every year Republican leaders propose an increase in percentage of funding for Iowa's public schools. The reality is those increases do not keep pace with inflation, right? We talk about, we are always talking about how bad the price of eggs has gotten. Meanwhile, we don't carry that logic forward to our public schools. And here's the deal, right? It's because like people are saying what people are showing us is their values, right? They're showing us that this is not an institution that they value. This is not something that they're wanting to take seriously, and therefore they're happy to continue what are in fact, right, cuts, right? Because if you're not keeping pace with inflation, you are in fact giving these institutions less money, right? That's just how this works.
And I think that Pat Grassley in the House proposing a higher percentage, even if it is minuscule, shows that they are hearing from their constituents, and that works. Iowans still care about their schools, and I think that putting that pressure on their representatives matters.
Third story, Republican senators are advancing a bill that would limit the lawsuits by Iowans seeking compensation for pesticide-related illnesses. The bill would prohibit lawsuits alleging pesticide manufacturers failed to warn consumers of health risks as long as the manufacturer follows federal labeling requirements. Bayer, the maker of Roundup, said it would jeopardize farmers' access to these chemicals. Environmental groups, trial lawyers, and normal Iowans say it's about cutting off the one real way of seeking justice after a deadly diagnosis. Amie, is this a story you've been following?
Yes, because so listen, the EPA has been failing us in this way. Like, if you look at other countries, worldwide health organizations, they have classified glyphosate as at least a possible carcinogen as far back as 2015. So for 10 years now, the rest of the world has said, yeah, this probably causes cancer. But in the United States, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, allows companies to submit their own studies, their own data and research showing whether their products are safe or not. We're letting, the inmates run the institution, basically. And that's why glyphosate hasn't been classified. And in fact, the federal government said in 2022, EPA, you need to actually restudy this. Like, go get your own studies. And that has not been released either. So, I mean, it's just a frustrating thing. Like, Bayer's taking this and running with this. Glyphosate hasn't been classified. Yes, but here's why. It's become political.
Activists have labeled this bill the Cancer Gag Act. The notion being that when a neighbor ends up getting a deadly diagnosis, a cancerous diagnosis after being exposed to these chemicals, then the idea would be that this bill would prevent them from using the courts to go after the companies that make these chemicals, that put them on the market, make our lives less healthy, right? And there was a big rally at the Iowa Capitol this week that included a altar to people who've died in the state of Iowa from these chemicals, right? I don't know. I think you can feel a lot of different ways about like kind of the future of big ag, about the future of some of these chemical companies. But to remove the kind of like one of the few ways that we have about like gaining some recourse to the impacts that they've imposed on our lives, right? I mean, I don't have a chance. I don't have the ability to say yes or no to my neighbor using a chemical, right?
Exactly.
But here we have kind of another attempt at trying to paralyze government, of industry trying to capture regulators. And this bill, it came up and was passed by the Senate last session. And here it seems to be on its way to a Senate committee, perhaps to get approval eventually by the Senate chamber. It never got full consideration in the House, so we'll see kind of what becomes of this bill as we move forward.
Yeah, do you think it's got a chance this year?
Bayer is a tremendously well-moneyed, well-supported company. They are a tremendous lobbyist in the Iowa State House. They put a lot of money in favor of bills like this. They're powerful, right? And these moneyed interests have major influence on kind of the way that our politics are run. I haven't done any looking into kind of what their campaign finance, what the campaign finance angle to this is, but it certainly would be interesting to take a look at kind of how much money they contribute to state house and Senate elections.
Maybe you should look into that, Zachary.
Yeah, I should do a lot of things. I probably will.
Email Zachary if you want him to do that.
Email Zach at iowastartingline.com. Tell him to get off his ass and actually do some work. Stop it with this podcast.
Campaign finance is I think people of both parties want us to look into the money more.
Oh, of course. I totally agree. I know readers always love stories that have lots of numbers in them.
Oh, wait. Do we hate numbers or do we love them? We love them now. At the beginning of the podcast, we hated them. Now we love numbers.
Well, yeah, I'm a flip-flop on whether I like numbers or not. Last week, we dug into Trump's defamation lawsuit against the Des Moines Register and gold standard pollster J.Ann Stelzer. It won't surprise you to learn that I'm not a lawyer, but I do know one. I called Samantha Barbas. She's a professor at the University of Iowa College of Law. She's a nationally recognized expert on defamation law. In our Cornhole matchup this week, she speaks to exactly how strange this lawsuit is on its face and offers some insight into the context it's coming in. That's coming up on Cornhole Champions. Miller Meeks and former state senator Brad Zahn have joined former President Donald Trump's lawsuit against pollster J.Ann Stelzer, her company, the Des Moines Register, and its parent company, Gannett. In the complaint refiled at the end of January, lawyers argued that the poll was an act of, quote, brazen election interference, that it violated consumer fraud protections. We now turn to Samantha Barbas. Barbas is a professor at the University of Iowa College of Law. She specializes in defamation more broadly and has written extensively about the 1964 landmark New York Times v. Sullivan case. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me on the show.
This lawsuit is grounded in Iowa's consumer protection law. For lawsuits of this kind, can you kind of give me a sense of how common that is as a way at trying to get at a defamation issue?
Yeah, so a couple of points on that. So most of Trump's lawsuits against the media, of which there are many, are defamation claims. So Trump alleges in those cases that his reputation has been harmed, right? That the media have said something that is false and unflattering about him, and he brings suit. This case over the poll results that were inaccurate really couldn't be framed as a defamation case because his reputation technically wasn't harmed, right?
He won his case, so it would be, is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that by saying that this poll result was incorrect, that doesn't harm Trump's reputation. Right? It's not making an allegation about his character or some aspect of Trump. So he couldn't really bring it under the legal action for defamation, which requires that your reputation be harmed. So he had to find a different sort of law to bring his grievance under. Again, his anger about this poll result, which reported that Kamala Harris was going to win Iowa. And so he turned to this Iowa consumer fraud law. And that was a very unique thing to do because consumer fraud laws usually are meant to protect consumers of goods and services against deceptive advertising. So, the manufacturer who's trying to pass off a product by making a false claim, right? That's the sort of thing that would be punished under a consumer fraud law, not someone publishing a poll that turns out to be incorrect.
because this is coming under a different law, you're as someone who studies these kinds of actions, right? Did you have to bone up on your consumer fraud protections background? Like, what for someone who studies this, was this a kind of a surprise for you?
Yeah, I think everyone who was watching this was completely alarmed because no one had really ever mobilized a consumer fraud law to bring a claim against a pollster or a newspaper for publishing something that turned out to be inaccurate. Again, it's a totally unique sort of legal action in theory, which was done because Trump was apparently desperate to lash out against these parties and couldn't do so through the normal legal channels, namely, a defamation lawsuit, because it didn't apply here.
As I understand Iowa's consumer protection law here, a key question here is, did Ann Seltzer make issue some statement, right, that was used then to for the kind of purchase, sell, acquisition of goods, right? Unpack, obviously, like you're not advising this, you're not the lawyer defending this that filed this action, but walk me through, like, what kinds of, I mean, is there some part of this that we can shoehorn into that framework of consumer protection?
Yeah, so I have never heard of a newspaper being classified as a good or the providing of news being described as a service for the purpose of one of these consumer fraud actions. So they are making the claim, nevertheless, that giving the public information is a service that must be done properly and accurately, and that it's a fraud on the public when it's not done that way. But reporting something that turns out to be incorrect is not perpetuating a fraud on the public. That's just the process of journalism. Not everything is right. But again, they're really reaching here and trying to, as you said, shoehorn the facts of the case into this very inappropriate type of law.
But let's steel man it for a second, right? So, because again, right, like, should a judge decide? I mean, there's a potentiality out there, right, that a judge says absolutely this is a consumer fraud issue, and rules accordingly. I've heard journalists refer to their work as a service, right? I have heard them refer to them as if not a good, a moral good, right? And I wonder, like, how is that different? How are these? Help me understand how these are not the same, or how they are the same, how they could be made the same.
Yeah. First of all, I think it's really unlikely that a court would say that there's even a valid claim here. Again, because of the inapplicability of the law. And also, he would have to show that this was done with the intent to defraud. So not just that they made an innocent mistake, but that this was actually a part of a concerted effort to undermine the Trump campaign, which is what he alleges. So it's very shaky on many different grounds. But going to the point of whether news is a service, I mean, one way that delivering the news is different from, delivering groceries or something is that we have speech involved, right? And that's protected by the First Amendment. And so even false speech that is intentionally made, intentional falsehoods are protected by the First Amendment. And so, again, there's no mandate to only deliver news that is perfectly correct. We wouldn't have free speech if that was the requirement.
Going back a little bit to what you were saying about kind of the it being necessary to prove that the defendants in the creation of the poll, right, that there was like some sort of intent to create a result, to put out a result that misinforms the electorate, right, the consumer of this poll. How difficult of a standard is that to kind of determine the intent of the people that created this poll?
Yeah, I mean, I think in this case it will be extremely difficult because I think anyone has really seen actual proof of intent to mislead. But they, might try to show that, I don't know, that this pollster had particular animus against Trump, or, that, think there was some allegation that the poll had been leaked or disclosed prior to the fact to get additional attention to her claims and so forth. So they would have to kind of show a pattern of, desire to harm the Trump campaign, which again, I think would be hard to come up with.
Yeah, and having consumed a number of Ann Seltzer interviews since it coming to the state, not a person that has not a firebrand by any means, doesn't have a ton to say about the state of politics.
Right.
So the one part of this is the consumer fraud piece. The other is kind of this election interference piece. This notion that this was used in a way to interfere with the results of the election, right? I mean, I find it really interesting that U.S. Representative Mariette Miller Meeks also signed on to this because she also won her election, but is under the impression that this was that it was because of this poll that she won by such a tight margin. I think it was 799 votes that separated her from her opponent, Christina Bohannon. For this to constitute election interference, right? Did those claims within this lawsuit have a firmer ground?
Not at all, I think. And actually, I was rereading the complaint, and it looks like the claim is really brought under the consumer fraud law rather than any type of election interference law. They mention election interference in the complaint, but that doesn't seem to really be the main gist of the legal action, which is about, again, defrauding the consumer, allegedly. But again, I think, with the election interference, they're suggesting that one thing they're claiming is that Trump had to spend more money on his campaign, right? Because he perceived that, the state was so heavily against him and that this, impeded his efforts to run his campaign as he wished, or something to that effect. But again, it's my opinion that all of these claims are more or less baseless. If we look at the timing of this lawsuit was filed right after Trump won a defamation case that he brought against ABC. This was back in December. This resulted in a $16 million settlement for Trump. And right after that, he made a public announcement. I guess it was in a press conference where he said that he was going to continue to sue the press because they needed to be taught a lesson. And so he was going to attempt to carry out his sort of war on the press through libel lawsuits and related lawsuits. And immediately after that, we get this lawsuit against the Des Moines Register and the pollster. So I think it can be easily surmised that this is all part of, a campaign or a program, to punish, Trump's enemies, as perceived enemies in the press and the media more broadly.
Kind of arcing us to a close here. As folks are trying to, again, I think anytime the courts are involved, I think for a general news consumer, a lot of the kind of finer points here get lost. We're waiting to hear. Can you walk me through kind of what the process ahead is for this lawsuit and kind of what people should expect as we move forward?
Yeah, so as I understand it, there has been a second lawsuit filed against the Register and the pollster over the same poll. And this is brought by a conservative grassroots action group that is alleging that, again, the readers of the newspaper were defrauded by this false information. So I think that both of these lawsuits will be dismissed at some point. And if that's the case, then they'll end right there. But I think it's interesting that Iowa does not have a slap statute, which would, bring these cases to an even more expedient end.
Can you walk me through what a SLAPP statute would involve? These are strategic lawsuits against public participation. Can you walk me through kind of what would be involved there?
Yeah. So, as you suggested, a SLAPP lawsuit is a lawsuit that's brought by often, a disgruntled person in power who's trying to quash their critics through a lawsuit that is often meritless. And those are known as lawsuits against public participation. And many states have statutes that are designed to cut off this litigation early in the process so that defendants don't have to go through the burden of, spending money on legal defense if this is just an attempt to silence their right to free speech.
And I mean, I think it's a genuine concern that following this lawsuit, I mean, Ann Seltzer announced her retirement shortly after the release of the poll. But, I could see a world where Gannett says, we had to spend a bunch of money to defend this lawsuit, hired lawyers, et cetera, to file stuff. I could see them saying that actually we want to get out of the polling business. This is clearly just not something that's economically worth it to us, and they decide to ditch this kind of the Iowa poll, kind of their long tradition producing the Iowa poll. Walk me through how a SLAPP statute could. Is there a model that you're aware of that would prevent this kind of action from taking place?
Yeah. So SLAPP statutes vary from state to state, but the basic idea is that the plaintiff will have to prove early on in the case that they have a chance of succeeding, and that this is not a totally frivolous claim. And if they can't make that showing, then the lawsuit will be dismissed. And in some states, the plaintiff will have to pay the defendant's attorney's fees. So it's a real deterrent to bringing these kinds of frivolous actions.
Samantha Barbas is a professor at the University of Iowa College of Law. Samantha, thank you so much for joining me to chat about this.
Thank you so much.
So, Amie, what'd you think of Samantha?
I mean, I should have known that this was about what this lawsuit was ultimately about, but it does worry me when she talks about how this lawsuit is basically an attack on the free press in general, right? But also that it is, because of that, likely to be dismissed even in the absence of Iowa having any sort of SLAPP legislation. So, yeah, it's just brazenly political, which makes sense, I guess. It's disappointing.
I mean, I love normally when I have an expert conversation, it tends to be, they'll say like, well, on one hand, da 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 da, but on the other hand, but I get kind of the A/B answer. What I loved about this one was Samantha Barbas has, you can hear her say like she does not believe that this is going to go forward, that it will be dismissed by the courts. But weird things have happened, and we'll certainly see whether or not this kind of how the courts come to this case, and whether they take this kind of what she calls a novel judicial theory. That was another episode of Cornhole Champions. If you liked the show, please rate it, subscribe, and share it with your friends. While you're at it, sign up for my newsletter at cornholechampions.substack.com and get these episodes straight to your inbox when they drop Wednesday mornings. Cornhole Champions is a weekly podcast powered by Iowa Starting Line. This podcast is produced by me with music from Avery Mossman. Cornhole Champions is a proud member of the Iowa Writers Collaborative. We'll see you with a new episode next Wednesday. Until then, I'm Zachary Oren Smith.
And I'm Amie Rivers.
Thanks for listening.
Are you soda or Coke?
Me? Oh,
Yeah.
I guess I'm soda. I don't know anybody that actually refers to it as Coke. I think that's something like one Southerner working at a Cracker Barrel like told someone from Massachusetts like a very long time ago. And it's just like it's something that like kind of caught on. It's sort of like I don't actually believe that folks from Rhode Island refer to fountains as bubblers. Water fountains.
Refer to what as what?
Water fountains as bubblers.
Water fountains. Oh, you mean drinking fountains?
I don't believe anybody actually refers to that, but it's sort of like people tell me that Southerners use Coke, not soda, in the way that you weirdos use pop, not soda, right? I think we all agree that soda is the right answer here, and I don't know why like we have to like pretend like this is the regional divide. Bubbler, though, I think we can all agree is a contagion. It must be stopped. I will hold. There will be no safe quarter in my United States for people to refer to water fountains as bubblers.
These are the stands that we need to be taking. In this
These are,
administration.
the last time a Southerner felt really strongly about a water fountain, we fought. There was a whole fucking legislative agenda that had to get passed. So maybe I should shut mine out. Whole war. Well, I think the water fountains postdated
later.
the Civil
You're
War
right.
by like maybe a century.
Yeah. Okay.